So my name's Jen Johnsson. So I'm here to talk today about positive behaviour support delivered by a telepractice. And I wanted to acknowledge my colleague, my partner, my university partner, Dr. Kim Bulkley. So Kim and I have worked together on a number of projects together. She was my supervisor back when I did my PhD in telepractice. So a lot of the work that we're doing together has been great. Okay, so I guess normally I get a lot more time to talk about policy and research because I love my policy. But looking back at policy in terms of telepractice and delivery of positive behaviour support. So when I kind of do this talk, when I talk to anyone, I have pre-COVID policy and post-COVID policy and what we see. And so I've been looking, this Tele-PBS projects did start some time ago. So we started last year in 2019 and we've been researching telepractice for a while in our team. And so the policy and the practice around it, so it was pretty dry. There was a lot of kind of talk around, hey, we've got all these gaps for rural and remote participants. Maybe telepractice is the way to go. There's a lot of, let's leverage off the evidence and the emerging evidence around telepractice to start looking at this as a way to bridge the gap between our rural and remote participants on the autism spectrum and our clinicians in metropolitan areas. So there's a lot of kind of talk about, okay, let's get this policy going. We need to look at telepractice, but unfortunately it was pretty slow in terms of research around bringing in telepractice and especially in behaviour support. So we're looking at a lot of studies. So we're seeing some studies come through and they're starting to see that initial treatment evidence supporting positive behaviour support behind telepractice. However, a lot of the studies are focusing on the implementation of applied behaviour analysis as opposed to the positive behaviour support model. We're not seeing that in the literature so far. And what we're also seeing in the literature is that there is really a lot of, there's a lot of focus on the actual model, the practice. Does the model work? And less on all the contextual elements around the participant, the person, the family. So about their quality of life, because that's what we look at when we're looking at behaviour. When we see behaviours as concern, we want to know not just are we seeing that reduction in challenging behaviour, but are we seeing that improvement in quality of life, in meaningful participation? And then when we're working with young children or children on the spectrum, we want to see other people around them. Are we seeing some capacity being built in the parents around a child as well? And so we're not seeing a lot of that in the literature so far. So we're also seeing the limited research on generalisation and the long-term impact. So we're seeing these studies that are very much, yes, it's working right now, it's great. We're seeing that reduction in behaviours of concern. What happens for this child as they go into school when we see major changes? So what's the long-term impact? And is telepractice a really good model to keep supporting and making those long-lasting changes? And so with that in mind, we had a telepractice research pilot that we did in 2017 to 18. And what we found that was behaviour support was something that was really important. A lot of goals that we were addressing and working on through that pilot were around behaviour support. And so that led me on to looking at kind of the delivery and the evaluation of positive behaviour support. And so we have a registered clinical trial for the delivery of positive behaviour support to regional remote children on the autism spectrum and their local support team. So for those who don't know what positive behaviour support is, it really is kind of bringing in those elements of, yes, we're looking at the principles and practices, evidence-based practices that are based around applied behavioural analysis. We're really kind of harnessing that applied expertise of everyone that is surrounding that participant, the key stakeholders, the parents, the support network and the clinicians, and we're placing that within their natural communities of support. So it's that naturalistic way of looking at behaviour support. And so we've registered this as a clinical trial and then we've been starting to deliver these services. Now, when we're looking at our evaluation, so we have the positive behaviour support service is around 20 hours and that includes that functional assessment, interview and observation, as well as developing a whole series of behaviour support plans, the implementation and monitoring phase. But what we want to know through this intervention, through this evaluation, we want to know, yes, we're seeing some change in that behaviour, but we really want to focus in around what's the change and what's meaningful change for this person. Because that can be really different across lots of different stakeholders. So what does meaningful change, what is it actually for that person? And are we seeing change in that? So changes in quality of life. We want to see that parent empowerment and efficacy. We want to know what we're doing is acceptable. So is it our families and our participants finding that it is not too bad, and that it's effective, like they're reporting that they feel like it's making a change, of course, behaviour change, and then also treatment fidelity as well. Now, what we did as part of that action research cycle is that in December last year, we conducted 5 interviews. We wanted to see that what we were doing, what we were starting to implement was kind of addressing the needs, and then we could adapt, to reflect on that and adapt back into our model of practice. And so that's what I'm going to spend the rest of the time, my allotted time now, talking about. It's just some of those adaptations that we have looked at and we have learned so far in terms of Tele-PBS. So we interviewed 2 parents of children on the autism spectrum. We interviewed the Tele-PBS practitioner, as well as a PBS supervisor and manager. So we really wanted to look at all elements of service delivery. How is this going? And then what is the experience of the participant? And so it's really just to inform how we're going through this pilot study. Now, in terms of positive behaviour support, we use this tiered approach. So at the very foundation, we're looking at creating that autism-friendly environment. And many behaviours are actually addressed just by creating things like making sure that there's a functional communication system in place, looking at the social development and thinking about putting strategies in place to address those and support those. So many different things in that quality of life, tier 1 strategies. If we're still seeing behaviours, then we move on to our tier 2 strategies where we target those specific behaviours. And then tier 3, we are looking at those higher level behaviours, more complex behaviours that we might need to address as well. And so at all levels, we had to think about how does this model adapt, not just how does behaviour support, but at each level we need to understand what are the adaptations and what are the limitations of telepractice for this. And one of the things that we've found overall so far in our feedback from families and practitioners is that it is very important to be as clear as possible on what to expect from the outset. Telepractice for many families when we hit COVID was an absolutely new thing. And so we had to be clear on what we could expect. A lot of our practitioners were brand new to it too, so they didn't even know what to expect. So being clear, like, this is what we're going to do. I'm here with you, we're going to learn together, and this is what we're going to try and work towards. So making sure that expectations are clear around that. We always had to consider family context and fit. This is a no-brainer. A lot of our families did feedback, and our 2 families, one of our families did feedback that it might not have been the right fit for them. We have had other practitioners who've said with other families they've worked for, it really is making sure that it is fitting for them right now. And under COVID, when we had homeschooling and working from home and everything happening, that was one of the things that's kind of thinking about, is that the right time, the right context and the fit for the family. Involving the participant as much as possible is so important in any kind of telepractice intervention. And this is one of the big ones, is that a coaching model of support. Now, this is probably one of my favourite things that's come out of all of our research on telepractice so far, is we're really getting back to family support network capacity building models of support. And it's just been really great to see. So in terms of that tier 1 support, and I'll move through these quite quickly, one of the biggest things is really getting to know that person, building that therapeutic alliance, because we know that it can take longer on via telepractice. So not forgetting the small talk that we usually come in and say, oh, how's your day and how's this going? And I see that in the room, and all of that small talk was so important to build rapport, to start understanding this person. And the same with environmental tours. So the benefit of using devices and things that are movable is we can go around, and one of our practitioners was taken on a tour around a whole farm and met all the animals in every room in the house. So that was really nice to see. So it's really establishing who's who in the team and bringing that team approach in. And then using all the tools that we have on telepractice to draw out things like support networks. When we develop things through the screen, we find that we can see that kind of buy-in a lot more. So there's lots of different ways that we're measuring our behaviour. So one of the main things, so we've got reports, assessments, and then looking at the behaviour frequency, so taking some data. Direct observation is one of the ones coming into this research that I wanted to find out the most about. So one of the things that what I've found from feedback and just experience here is that we need to see the whole situation, not just this behaviour. So videoing, if families say, I'm just going to show you the behaviour, it's like, can you just put me on the cabinet or up on the wall, wherever you can put me so I can see that whole context. That's what's most important, is seeing that contextual element there. And then in terms of our Tier 3 support, so this is where we might have really quite severe challenging behaviours. We might have distraction or self-harm or danger to other people. And so really it is about safety and recovery. But one of the amazing things about telepractice is that it can bring a bunch of people together in such a quick time. So looking quickly, is there a skills deficit there in the local support team that telepractice can bring together? And one of our staff has even done a whole school webinar where everyone could get together at once to be able to learn, and that was co-produced by the student, to be able to learn, this is about me. So we're seeing like that bringing together a lot of information. We have still so much to learn. We're only at the start of our research on Tele-PBS, and I'm really excited. Hopefully I'll be able to bring you more information as we go along, and I'm happy to connect with anyone who's excited about this area to talk more. So thank you for having me.